Hey everybody, welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games, where we feed our people with relatable content and our victory condition is your satisfaction. I am Harry, and today we're going to be having another top 10 video for you all. Today I'll be covering my top 10 small box games. And without going too much into detail, I'm just talking about games that have a relatively small box in comparison to the standard size boxes. And basically for standard, I'm using your typical squared shaped Ticket to Ride box size, and also the rectangular, Carcassonne, Puerto Rico type boxes, which are a little bit smaller, although a little bit longer than the Ticket to Ride boxes. I'm using small boxes, at least what I deem to be small. If you disagree with any of my choices, please feel free to comment down below in the comment section. But before I go into my actual top 10, I do want to mention two honorable mentions. This list was a little bit tough for me because I do own a lot of small box games, and I like a good amount of them, a lot. There's some that I'm a little bit meh about, or maybe I've played out on them because I've played it so long and so many times for so many years that I've grown cold on them. But there's still a good amount of games that I really, really love and I really, really enjoy. So without any further ado, let me go straight into my honorable mentions. The first honorable mention I like to mention here is Tiny Epic Quest. This did not quite make it to the list, but I've also only played this game twice, so I wonder and suspect that this game might be able to creep up into the top 10 small box games. It definitely fits the criteria. This is a very small box, among the smaller boxes of my games that I've considered for this list. I need to play a little bit more. It might go on, but I'm still iffy about it, or else it would already have been on my top 10. But I do like the game. I'm just not sure whether or not I love it. And then the other honorable mention is a game that I do know that I love, but it just missed the list. And maybe some of these games that actually made it might fall off the list, and this might make it back. This is a game that's been tried and true for me for some time. You've already heard me mention it in the channel, and that's Res Publica. Nice trading game, set collection game to score the most victory points. I have a review for it. If you haven't heard about it and it sounds intriguing to you, you like trading games with some unique trading mechanisms and simple set collection, you should check out my review on this game. And now we'll get straight into the actual top 10 games with small boxes. And we will begin with my number 10, which is Kingdomino Duel, designed by Bruno Cathala and by Ludovic Mablanc, who he partners up with for many co-designs. This is a roll and write, two-player only version for Kingdomino, the regular Kingdomino, hit mega mass market hit Kingdomino. This game is a roll and write again, and basically you're trying to, you're rolling dice and you're drafting the dice, right? And whoever goes first drafts one dice first, but whoever goes second gets to draft two in a row. And the two dice that you draft end up making up your virtual domino, which you'll use to pencil in your little grid that you have in your pen and pad grid, which represents your kingdom and basically the different shapes or patterns that you find on the emblems, on the shields of the dice. They're going to score you points if they're adjacent to each other, if they have a cross on it, and you multiply them. And if they're adjacent regions, you multiply the amount of crosses by the amount of regions with the same symbol, right? And you're scoring all these different symbols. And there's a couple neat things this game adds. It adds a few special bonuses that players can collect by being the first player to get, X amount of dice in one specific type. It's neat. I like it. I had to explore this game more. If it had an official solo variant, I'm sure there's an unofficial solo variant or a plethora of them out there. But if it had an official solo variant, it might actually have jumped up the list more because I really enjoy the roll and write game here. But it's a two-player only game, so it's very limited in that sense. You can't play three players, you can't play solo. But it's a good game, and I think I might like it more than its big brother, Kingdomino. So that's my number 10. Now we move on to my number 9. And I've also covered this game on this channel, done a playthrough of One Deck Dungeon. And this is a one or two player game. I've only played it solo, and I love this game solo. It's a dungeon crawl, but with literally one deck. The name says it all. You have one small deck of cards that represents the different rooms, the different monsters, the different dangers you will encounter in your dungeon delve. And basically you go through the deck 3 times, each time representing a different level of the dungeon. And once you've gone through the deck 3 times, if you're still alive to tell it, if your hero or your character has not been knocked out or defeated, it still has some health, then you can face the boss, the mastermind, the overlord. And the game comes with like 5 different overlords, and each of the overlords have their own different caves. And again, they have their different unique stats. The different dungeons have different challenges that you must complete. And basically, you're doing a lot of dice chucking in this game, but you're using the dice as like worker placement in a sense, right? Because you have these different monsters and these different perils, as they call them, that require specific numbers of dice to be placed on them in order for you to not only successfully defeat it, because you're kind of guaranteed to defeat a monster or a peril as long as you outlive it, if you survive the encounter, but you're placing it strategically on certain spots because any spot that's left uncovered has some sort of casualty that you will pay. Either, time will, go by or be spent by flipping more cards from the deck. The deck not only serves as your rooms and your monsters and your perils, but it also serves as a timer of sorts before you go to the next level, or you're forced to go to the next level. So you don't want time to be spent. You want to kind of have control of the time, right? But also some of the consequences include loss of health. And again, that's how you stay alive. You cannot win the game if you die. So you want to like strategically block these spots that either take some health from you or take some time from you, and so on and so forth. And you're rolling all these different colored dice, and each dice is assigned to some particular attribute, whether it be your speed or your strength or your magic. And you have all these different stats, and you have your life, your health is a specific stat as well. You have about 5 different heroes that you could pick from. And it's so interesting because you got everything that a dungeon crawl has. You can level up, right? So you start as a level 1 character, and as the game progresses, you can use experience points acquired by defeating monsters, by defeating perils. You get to use these cards. You acquire these cards, and you can use them to gain experience points, which could get you to level up to level 2, 3, and 4. But another thing is, every time you defeat a monster or a peril, you can use the card in 1 of 4 ways. So it's almost like a multi-use card game as well. Some games like San Juan and Race for the Galaxy, where Glory to Rome, where you have cards and you can use them for multiple things. So every time you acquire a card, it's not the cards that you have in a hand. You don't have a hand in this game. But every time you acquire a card because you've accomplished that encounter or defeated that monster, you get to either choose to slide it underneath your level card. You have a level card that tells you what level you are, to add it as experience points, and a certain threshold of experience points graduates you to the next level. Or you could choose for it to be an item, right? Like a weapon of sorts, and that item will increase one or maybe more, 2 sometimes, of your stats, your strength, your magic, your speed or agility, I think it is, or your health, right? So you can increase those stats, or you could use it as a special ability, right? You have a bunch of different special once around abilities. You could use it as a special once around ability for your character, or you could use it as a particular potion. There's some potions you're going to be getting throughout the game that if you spend a potion token, you can activate that potion that you have, as long as you have the potion tokens to activate it. So it's interesting that finding out, because you have a card and sometimes you're like, well, this card has, a really bad, equipment bonus, but it has an amazing experience bonus. So you know what? I'm going to use it as experience. But you might be confronted with the challenge of, yeah, it's better experience than it is, help for my stats, but I desperately need some help for my stats. Even if this only gives me, 1 more agility stat, you know what? It's worth it. Right now, I'm desperate for anything. So you got those really, really tough decisions. It's a beatable game, but at the same time, it's a hard game to win. I lose more times than not, but I find it to be just a fun, puzzly, solo experience with the dungeon crawl feel. And that is just my number 9. Now we'll move on to my number 8, and it's Tiny Epic Western, another Tiny Epic game. designed by Scott Alms. Basically, he takes, big games or medium games, you could say, and he puts them in small packages, right? In small components. It's not that the game itself is small. It's not that the game is necessarily short. It's not even that the game doesn't take up much table space, because you'd be surprised how the items found in this little box cover up a good amount of your table real estate. But it's just the fact that he's able to, make it all compacted into a transportable or a portable product that you could take with you anywhere. And this is a Wild West themed game where you're going through different buildings in the Wild West, your typical buildings, right? You got your town hall and you got your saloon and all these other places, right? And you're going there, and every time you go to the building, it's worker placement. You're going to these buildings, and the spots you go to, trigger certain abilities for you. And you could either get a smaller but guaranteed benefit, or you can risk things and get a better long-term benefit if you outlast or survive that round without someone else kicking you out of that spot. And basically, your worker can be placed where somebody else has placed their worker, and you can have a duel. And basically, you roll dice, you compare some cards, and whoever wins the duel actually gets that space. And if it's a space that has a long-term benefit, then yay, yippee for you. You get a little bit more resources from that spot. But you might have wanted to choose a guaranteed spot that would have given you less resources and not have the risk of having that spot taken away from you. You have all this worker placement, but then after the worker placement, you're doing a hand of three-hand poker or three-card poker, where you have one card in your hand and you're going to choose which building you're going to go to, and each of the buildings is surrounded by a poker card, a face-up poker card. And you're going to choose which buildings you go to, strategically thinking which building you have the best chance of winning a game of three-card poker based on your one card and the two cards that surround those buildings. There's no guarantee, because once your opponents reveal their poker card, they may have had a better hand there, but you're using the probability and so on and so forth, and also the risk versus reward. What is it that building is going to get me if I go there? And you're doing all of this to win resources over to build buildings. It's like a city building game, right? Typical for like that Wild West flavor where we were expanding westward and developing cities over there. So you build all these different buildings, and the buildings each have symbols in three different industries. And that's where the victory points come, because you're trying to have majority or secondary shares in all of these different industries. And basically the buildings have certain symbols in the three different industries. One card might have three of a kind in just one industry, the green industry, right? I think it's like the rails, the wagon, and I forgot what the third industry was. But so you get three of a kind in one industry, or you might get another building that gives you one in one and one in the other. And at the end of the game, you're trying to have either primary or secondary shares in these different industries. Because if you're the third or fourth, it's irrelevant. You're not going to score any points. And whoever has the most points at the end of the game, based on those shares, wins the game. So it's really, really cool. It has a little bit of a stock market feel even. But the base core of the game is just a combination of worker placement and poker. And the concept of poker is very fascinating. I still think poker is a fun game. I don't play it often. I haven't played it in many years, but it is a cool game. And when a modern board game is able to incorporate poker in an effective way, then I truly can get behind it. I know some people may not like poker too much, but again, just incorporating that with a nice little worker placement, some stock market elements, really, really cool game for me. That is my number 8 small box game of all time, Tiny Epic Western. Now we move on to my number 7, and this is Point Salad. And I just wrote about this recently, not too long ago, on my Instagram account. If you haven't checked out my Instagram account, stop wasting your time. It's When Harry Met Board Games 7. You don't want to miss it. So, this game here is a nice filler game, card drafting game, and the name says it all. It's a point salad. Not only thematically are you acquiring salad items, but there's 108 different ways to score in this game. And that makes it so cool, because every game is going to be different, because you're never going to score points in exactly the same way. So the way the game works is On your turn, you have a row of 3 stacks of cards that are face down. And the backside of each of these cards, each of the 180 cards that come in this game, has a different, unique scoring condition. And then below those 3 stacks, you're going to have face-up cards. You're going to have 2 rows of face-up cards corresponding with each of those 3 stacks. So you're going to have 6 different cards in total of the salad items. And on your turn, you have 2 choices. You could either draft one of the scoring cards, right, on the top of the stack, or you can draft 2 of the face-up salad item cards that are in the market, and then replace them with the top card of the scoring stack, right? So that's always going to fluctuate and change. You're not always going to have the same cards available for you. So you might think, oh, I really want that one, but ooh, now that one's gotten replaced, so it's no longer available. Really, really cool, really neat. Just 2 basic decisions, but it creates for so many tense, tight decision-making opportunities where you don't know whether or not you're better off grabbing a salad item or if you're better off grabbing a scoring card. Really, really neat, very replayable. This game has the potential to climb up even higher on my list of small box games. And right now it's already pretty high. My number 7, Point Salad. Now we will move on to my number 6. And this is a game that the core system of this game would have ranked higher on my list because this is a smaller version of a bigger game. But I have to admit that I personally am still a bigger fan of the bigger game. I've heard some people say they prefer the smaller game. I still prefer the bigger game. But the smaller game is good enough to make my number 6 small box game. And basically it is Ticket to Ride the Cities. So they came out with 2 of these back-to-back years, Ticket to Ride New York, Ticket to Ride London. I don't know there's a plan for a 3rd or more. I really hope so. I've thought about Ticket to Ride Paris. I thought about Ticket to Ride Tokyo, even though the fact that they came out with Ticket to Ride Japan leads me to believe that maybe Ticket to Ride Tokyo is not the next one in the line. But and they may be done with these 2. If they are, that's fine. These 2 are really, really good, small, condensed versions of Ticket to Ride. Geographically speaking, you're only in a small city, or not such a small city. These are both very populated cities. But you're only in a city here in New York and here in London. And the game takes, with 2 players, you can knock this game out in about 10 minutes. So for the people who think that Ticket to Ride is too long for what it is, this is a great alternative for you because the card drafting, the route network building in Ticket to Ride is a fine experience. I think what a lot of people have had a problem with is the fact that it's longer than a typical gateway game is, right? Because a good game of Ticket to Ride could last you 45 minutes, maybe even an hour if you're playing with 4 or 5 people, right? And for people, they're like, it's too light for what it is. I get it. I totally can understand where they're coming from. So these smaller versions solve that problem because forget about it. You're talking about 10 minutes. At that point, you're better off just playing best 2 out of 3, right? So what's interesting about them is that for their simplicity, they do add some neat features. The Ticket to Ride New York adds a bunch of different like touristic spots that you score a point for for every touristic spot that your route connects to. So that is neat. And even more neat is the unique scoring mechanism that they added to Ticket to Ride London, where you have 6 or is it 5? Yeah, you have 5 different districts, right? And each of those districts is comprised of like 5 cities or so, or maybe neighborhoods within London that you're trying to connect. And if your individual route can connect to each of those 5 cities, then you're going to score points equal to the number that's in the circle for that district. So they range from 1 through 5. So there's a district that's worth 1, a district that's worth 2, and so on and so forth, all the way to a district that is worth 5. And if you're able to connect, let's say, all the 5 points of that district to one another, you're going to score a bonus 5 points. So that's really neat, really cool incentive for it. So if you have been iffy about Ticket to Ride, you've been on the fence of Ticket to Ride, this is a great gateway experience too, a great learning game. And it's also probably a good entry point for younger players, right? You know, you do have the Ticket to Ride First Journey series, but this might work and at the same time appease an adult who's playing the game. So that is my number 6 small box game, Ticket to Ride the Cities, London and New York. And now we move on to my top 5, the cream of the crop. And this is a relatively new game to me, Port Royal. And this is designed by Alexander Pfister. And basically, this is a pirate-themed or nautical-themed game where players, there's a little bit of push your luck. You're deciding whether or not to draw cards from a deck or to stop, right? In fear of busting. And if you ever pull out a second card, so basically most of the cards are ships, different ships from different countries. You got Portugal and Spain and England and France and what else is it? Is it the Netherlands? I'm not sure. The Dutch, I think it is. And if you ever flip over a second ship of the same kind, then you busted and you're done for that turn. You're not going to get anything. However, if at any point you want to stop, you can draw cards. You can draw coins, basically, from one of the cards there. So you can, you know, if you have a British ship that gets you 3 coins, you can say, you know what, I'm going to collect those 3 coins from the British ship. However, the more cards you draw and have in your tableau, the more cards you can benefit from. Because usually you can only benefit from 1. But if your tableau, the tableau that you created, is at 5 cards, I think it is, or 6 cards, then now all of a sudden, if it's 4 different types of ships, now all of a sudden you could draw 2. You could choose 2 of them, right? But if there's 5 different types of ships, which there's only 5 different countries, 5 different nations represented in this game. If there's 5 different ships, then you could choose from 3 of those ships and collect the coin for those. But again, you're pushing your luck, because if you ever draw a card that's a double, it's the same nation as a nation that's already in the tableau, then guess what? You're done and you've wasted a turn. You lost a turn. But throughout the game, you're also acquiring different characters, and these characters give you different bonus, different special abilities. They have different symbols that work towards missions. This game comes with missions that give you bonus points as well. So you can like see a mission, and the mission is public knowledge. Everybody has access to it, and whoever accomplishes it first will gain the points that's on that mission. So you can spend a lot of your game working not only towards the coinage that you're going to get from the ships, but also working towards accomplishing those missions for additional victory points. The player who has the most victory points at the end of the game wins. Pretty simple, pretty neat, mostly push your luck, but some nice and neat, you know, special character abilities and a little bit of resource management as well. I think what's cool about this game is that one of the things that's cool is that when you discard cards, you discard it face down. So that keeps the player from having that perfect knowledge of what is out there and what is not, right? All right, so that's my number 5, Port Royal. And now we move on to my number 4, and that is Carson City, the card game, designed by Xavier Georges. I'm sure this is pronounced much differently than what I'm saying it. This is a smaller version or a card version of the bigger worker placement game simply known as Carson City. And basically players are building their segment of Carson City and trying to score points by having different combinations of buildings that combo differently with one another, right? So certain buildings benefit from having other buildings in your part of the city. So once you invest into some buildings, it's going to kind of, you know, direct you in the way you want to go as far as investing in buildings later on. Now, what's neat and interesting is you have this almost a trick-taking game that goes on for every round. It's an auction for turn order. And you place a card, you know, each player has a hand of 9 different cards ranging from 1 through 9 in their particular suit. And basically, whoever has the highest card wins. And you have a tiebreaker. You have a official tiebreaker. The game has a stack of cards, and that's always going to be rotating. And that stack of cards indicates which suit, because each player has a different suit, which suit has the ranking advantage for that particular round. And then based on whoever wins the auction, players, you know, take their turns in the corresponding turn order, and they draft these city cards. And basically, you're creating a grid of 8 by 8, but each card is divided into 4 little like sections, 4 quadrants that each have a different terrain feature, whether it's a blank space or one of the buildings or a mine or outlaws even. And basically, you can place these cards over one another, overlapping one another, as long as you match an empty space to an empty space, or you match a building on top of an empty space. But you could never overlap a building with a different building. You can overlap a building with the same type of building underneath. So it becomes a real spatial exercise trying to optimize your imaginary 8x8 grid and get as much for your money as you can get, right? In getting all those spots, but at the same time, comboing the different buildings effectively in order to score points. There's also special characters that you could also choose to bypass on that turn, the city cards, and instead draw a special character. And these special characters give you special abilities that you could use once per era. There's 2 eras in this game, each consisting of 9 rounds. So it's a total of 18 rounds. So once per era, you can activate these abilities, and a lot of them give you extra bonus points at the end of the game. So managing all of this is really cool. It does have a nice Wild West flavor to it with the different characters and the different building types. And again, it's a nice puzzly, spatial exercise with lots of different ways of scoring points. And the interesting thing about this game is that you need to have 4 players to play this game. So even if you only have, let's say, 2 human players or 3 human players, you need to have 1 or 2 dummy players to make up the 4. And it has a very functional system for making the dummy players work. I've played it solo even. When you play solo, you need 3 dummy players, and it works. Really, really cool game. Carson City, my number 4. Carson City, the card game. Now we move on to my number 3. And for some people, this might not be considered a small box game. It might not be considered a box game. It may not be considered a game for some people. I don't know. Or at least not a game for the sake of these kind of lists. But I can include it in my list. My number 3, it's a game I enjoy a lot. And me personally, I have it in small boxes. And that is Magic the Gathering. And I have my Elves versus Inventors duel deck here. And I have my Mind versus Might duel deck here. And these are the 2 sets that I primarily play with. I do have some other content of Magic the Gathering elsewhere, most of it in small boxes. So I am going to count this as a small box game because at the end of the day, you only need 2 of these to get cracking and play some good games. I played this a lot of times. Lots of replayability just in these small boxes. Magic the Gathering, a classic game for lots of people. They own thousands upon thousands of cards, maybe even tens of thousands of cards. Me, I only own a couple hundred, and for the most part, this is what I'm playing with. It's a fun game. Yes, it can be a little bit of an investment if you go the collectible route, if you buy these starter packs and try to continue to buy booster packs and try to, have it all. Then yes, it could be a bigger experience and definitely a much more expensive experience. But for what it is, it's a classic game. Richard Garfield, tactical 2-player card game, managing your different lands and your different creatures and your different spells and doing it all effectively to try to win. And especially the way the dual decks work, where they already make the 2 sides so asymmetric and you're trying to just figure out how you can outdo your opponent. Really, really cool game. Always fun to play. I wish I had more people to play with, especially during this pandemic, but it made it to my number 3 small box game, Ticket to Ride, Magic the Gathering. Now we move on to my number 2, and this was close. Here's the thing, my number 2, the theme and how much I enjoy its big brother. Again, this is a small brother to a bigger game. At least a bigger box game, maybe not necessarily a bigger game in length, but a bigger box game definitely. This game, I really enjoy the theme, and I love its big brother. Love it. It's one of my favorite games of all time. But the more I think about it, the more I realize how much less I love this game than its big brother. And because of that, even though I love its theme, and I do love the game, it's my number 2 small box game, and that is 7 Wonders Duel. I love 7 Wonders. I get it. Some people don't like the 2-player variant. I am somewhere in between the 2 camps. Some people absolutely loathe and despise the 2-player variant in 7 Wonders, the regular 7 Wonders. Some people love it and think it's better than 7 Wonders Duel. I wouldn't go that far, but I think it is a functional variant, and I do think that there are times where I would play it over 7 Wonders Duel just to get some of the mechanical experiences that you get in playing regular Seven Wonders that you don't get in Seven Wonders Duel. Seven Wonders Duel recreates the drafting system by basically giving you a static, row of cards. And basically some of them are available, some of them are not available. The tension is created by having cards that you cannot pick up until they're uncovered. The imperfect information is recreated by having some of the cards face up and some of the cards face down, so you don't know what's waiting for you on the other end. That's all well and good. I like it. It's fun. I like the idea that military and science are different, more legitimate ways of winning, perhaps, and in the original Seven Wonders, definitely military, because military in regular Seven Wonders can be a true waste of time sometimes. But here, if you neglect the military, your opponent is gonna win. And it doesn't matter how amazing your civilization is and how many points you score, you're gonna win. I won a game with the military where I was outscored by my opponent by almost 50 points. Almost 50 points. But it didn't matter because I had a military victory. So you do not want to neglect that. But really, really neat. I like how it incorporates, multiple wonders that each give you, a few little special abilities every time you complete it with just one card. So it does a good job of making the Seven Wonders experience a two-player version. But I still prefer the bigger multiplayer game, Seven Wonders. So this is my number 2 small box game, Seven Wonders, designed by Antoine Boza and Bruno Cathala came for the assist. And now finally we're going to get to my number 1 small box game of all time. And it wasn't the case maybe a few weeks ago. I wouldn't have said that. Not because I just played it. I've played it a long time. Well, not a long time ago. I played it maybe for the first time, maybe 8 months ago or so. But I had a couple recent plays recently that really, boosted it up in the rankings. But I could also see this going down because it may not be as replayable as Seven Wonders Duel or some of the other games that I mentioned. My number 1 small box game of all time is Le Havre Inland Port. This is the 2-player version of Le Havre, and I like it. And my wife Lily does not like this game. You should check out our video for our top 10 Uwe Rosenberg games and see the things she had to say about this game. And this game is definitely abstracted for an Uwe Rosenberg games. Uwe Rosenberg games tend to be fairly thematic, in my opinion, at least from a Euro game perspective. Like, you feel to some extent like you're doing what the game's theme entails. However, I will admit that in this game, you're manipulating this grid, which represents your warehouse, and your goods are represented by a square tile that you move along this grid to indicate how many you have of that good, of that resource. So basically you look at the number on the different columns on the bottom, and then you look the number on the left side of the different rows, and based on what row it's on and what column it's on, you add those two numbers, and that's how much you have of that good. And the interesting thing is all the buildings, because it's just like Le Havre in the sense that you're building and acquiring buildings that give you victory points, and the buildings give you different special abilities. And what they do is they allow you to manipulate that grid in a spatial way. And by manipulating that grid, you increase it. But there's specific rules to how you can manipulate this grid, which means quite often you're forced to make some very tough decisions where you have to either not optimize or you have to lose money or overpay for things, right? Because you don't get change in this game for the resources you use. If you cannot manipulate the grid in a precise way, then you might have to spend more resources to build the building than what the building actually required. So that's really, really neat. I like the different buildings. I like the dial. This game comes with a special dial. And that dial not only indicates turn order, but it also indicates how many rounds. So each player has one of these to represent the 12 different rounds. It represents how many turns are in this round, because just like in Le Havre, you have an odd number of turns in each round, and one player is going to have one more action that round than the other player. So just mapping that out is part of the strategy. And as the game progresses, it revs up because you start round one with only 3 combined actions. So one player is going to get 2 and the other player is going to get 1. And then by round 12, you have 9 combined actions where one player is going to get 5 actions and the other player is going to get 4. So that's really, really neat. But also when you're buying buildings, you actually place the buildings here on the different slots of the dial, which again adds to the abstract nature of this game. It doesn't feel, palpable. It doesn't feel tangible. It doesn't feel like here's a building card or a building tile that I could place my little meeple on and say, hey, I'm here and I'm going to do it, right? No, you just simply place it on this dial, and the dial here has different numbers ranging from 0 to 4. And as you rotate it to indicate what round you're in, it changes the value that's assigned to that building. And whenever you choose to use that building, whatever number it lines up with on the dial is how many times you could use that building. So if that building is on the number 2 slot, you can use that building for whatever benefit it gives you 2 times. If it's on the 4 slot, you get to use that building 4 times. However, if you wait too long for using your buildings, then it eventually ends up in this spot right here, which forces you to sell the buildings. And when you sell the buildings, you only sell them for half their value. So basically, you lost some money there. Now, it's interesting because you can use your opponent's buildings by paying them 1 coin. And sometimes you want to use their buildings just to prevent them from using it themselves, not just because of how much it would benefit you as an individual. I find this game to be really, really neat. My concern for this game is how replayable it is. I've played this game maybe 7, 8 times so far. I'm not, desperate for it. I've also intentionally have kept some of its content that comes in the base game. You're actually supposed to use all the content that comes in the base game. I've intentionally kept some of it out just to surprise myself in the future by adding a little bit of this stuff, because this game does not have any expansions and it doesn't have any shuffling or variable, setup in this game. So basically every game would feel the same because you're always going to have the same buildings and they always come out at the same time. So I basically set some of these buildings aside and I'm like, hey, I'm going to play with some of these buildings later on. It's going to be interesting to see how much I like this game, how much this game is able to endure the test of time. I feel very confident about a lot of the other games that I mentioned on this top 10, more confident than I feel about this game as far as replayability is concerned. But for what it is, this game speaks to me. If you like abstract games or don't mind abstract games, not abstract, your typical abstract strategy type of games, but games that are very abstracted, if you don't mind that and you like Le Havre, you're going to like this game. My number 1 small box game of all time, Le Havre Inland Port. And that's it. Those are my top 10 small box games. Thank you guys so much for your patience, for sitting through almost 40 minutes of me rambling about my favorite small box games. Something about a small box game that hits the mark, right? Because sometimes you buy a small box game and it's like, but when that small box game, you buy it and it's a home run, you're like, that was a great investment. I spent $20, I spent $22, I spent $25 for an amazing game that's giving me so much amazing experiences. And that's what these 10 games, or I should say 12 games, have done for me. Well, thank you so much for joining us here at When Harry Met Board Games. Don't forget to hit the like button down below and subscribe to our channel, and comment down below as to what are some of your favorite small box games. Which ones have I missed? Which ones do you consider in my list to not be small, or you disagree as to how good they are? Let me know. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much again, everybody. This is Harry. Take care, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.